Welcome to the African Law Seminar on Democracy and Good Governance in Africa. The second lecture on the principles governing democratic elections in Africa will be given by Ms. Abibata Berry, who is with the Constitutionalism and Rule of Law Unit in the Governance and Conflicts Prevention Directorate of the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union. We are absolutely delighted to have her with us today to give her lecture on this very important topic. It is my pleasure to welcome you and to give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Virginia and Candice. Thank you for inviting me for this seminar. As I was saying before we started, you are doing a good job. You are doing a good job because this is also going to contribute to the democratization process in Africa. And we are building the young generation. We are building the Africa we want. And I'm very happy and glad to be part of this. So thank you and welcome to all the attendees. I will switch to French and then I will start sharing the screen. So we get started. Thank you. Thank you very much. Et comme je le disais, je vous souhaite également la bienvenue à ce séminaire qui est organisé sur la thématique de la démocratie et de la bonne gouvernance. Et cet après-midi, je suis heureuse d'échanger avec vous sur les principes gouvernant les élections démocratiques en Afrique. Pour ce qui est du contexte de l'introduction, pour ce qui est de l'introduction, nous pouvons dire que depuis le début des années 90, l'Afrique a connu une transition remarquable vers le pluralisme électoral, remplaçant progressivement les régimes de partis uniques et les régimes militaires par des systèmes multipartites et des scrutins réguliers. Toutefois, la qualité démocratique et la crédibilité de ces élections demeurent très variables d'un pays à l'autre. Les contestations liées à la conduite et aux résultats des élections ont souvent débouché sur des violences post-électorales, une instabilité politique persistante et de graves violations des droits humains. Face à ces dérives, l'Union africaine et ses États membres ont élaboré un cadre normatif continental définissant des principes clairs pour régir des élections démocratiques. Les principaux instruments incluent la Charte africaine de la démocratie, des élections et de la gouvernance, la CADEC, de 2007, ainsi que la déclaration de l'OUA sur les principes régissant les élections démocratiques en Afrique de 2002. Le cadre normatif. De la souveraineté aux normes partagées. Dans les premières décennies post-indépendance, l'Organisation de l'Unité africaine OUA privilégiait la souveraineté et la stabilité au détriment du pluralisme politique. Le principe de non-ingérence dans les affaires intérieures des États africains s'est imposé comme norme dominante, la lutte contre le colonialisme étant considérée comme prioritaire. Cependant, la vague de démocratisation consécutive à la fin de la guerre froide a profondément reconfiguré les dynamiques de gouvernance sans toutefois se faire sans heurts. Les États africains ont progressivement reconnu que la légitimité et l'efficacité de l'action publique ne pouvaient être dissociées des principes démocratiques et du consentement populaire. Les déclarations fondatrices. Nous allons commencer par ces déclarations pour venir aux principes juridiques plus contraignants. Donc, pour ce qui est des déclarations fondatrices, nous avons la décision d'Alger de 1999 et la déclaration de Lomé qui ont ensemble condamné les changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement, établissant un consensus continental selon lequel l'accès légitime au pouvoir doit procéder d'élections crédibles. La déclaration de 2002 de l'OUA sur les principes régissant les élections démocratiques en Afrique est allée plus loin en fixant des normes pour des élections libres, régulières, transparentes et équitables, ancrées dans l'état de droit, le respect des droits humains et l'indépendance des institutions. La charte juridiquement contraignante. Ici, nous allons parler de la CADEC, qui est l'instrument le plus contraignant en vigueur que l'Union africaine a à sa possession. L'adoption de la CADEC en 2007 et son entrée en vigueur en 2012 ont transformé ces engagements politiques en obligations juridiques. Et ici, j'ouvre la parenthèse pour dire que, comme vous l'avez constaté, la CADEC a été adoptée en 2007 et il a fallu attendre 2012 pour qu'elle puisse entrer en vigueur parce qu'il a fallu qu'on atteigne un certain nombre de pays, un certain nombre de ratifications afin que l'instrument puisse entrer en vigueur. Et pour le cas précis de la CADEC, il a fallu attendre que 15 pays ratifient l'instrument avant son entrée en vigueur. Cette charte fournit un cadre global définissant les standards électoraux et les devoirs des États en matière de gouvernance démocratique. Elle consacre également le constitutionnalisme comme principe structurant des modalités d'accession et de dévolution du pouvoir politique, en affirmant la nécessité d'utiliser l'ordre constitutionnel pour régir les entrées et les sorties au niveau du pouvoir politique. Les principes électoraux. Dans cette partie, nous allons discuter des différents principes qui sont consacrés au niveau électoral. Vous avez les principes juridiques et fondateurs. Premièrement, nous allons parler de la souveraineté populaire. Les élections constituent le mécanisme à travers lequel les citoyens s'expriment. Ils expriment leur volonté et confèrent la légitimité à l'autorité publique. Au niveau de la CADEC, vous avez comme référence les articles 2 et 3 qui peuvent également soutenir ce point. La primauté de la Constitution et de l'État de droit. L'ensemble des processus électoraux doivent se dérouler dans le respect strict de la Constitution et des normes juridiques en vigueur. La régularité et la prévisibilité. Les élections doivent se tenir à intervalles légalement fixés afin de garantir la continuité institutionnelle, la redevabilité et la limitation des mandats. Les principes institutionnels et procéduriers. Nous avons ici comme principe fondateur l'indépendance et l'impartialité des organes de gestion des élections. Ces organes doivent être assurés par une autonomie juridique, administrative et financière effective. La transparence et la reddition des comptes. La transparence doit prévaloir à toutes les étapes, qu'il s'agisse de l'enregistrement des électeurs, de la gestion des bulletins ou de la publication des résultats. L'équité et la compétition. Tous les acteurs doivent bénéficier d'un accès équitable aux médias d'État, aux ressources de campagne, aux espaces publics. À ce niveau, comme vous le savez, en Afrique, plusieurs pays se sont dotés de ce qu'on appelle la HAC, la haute autorité qui assure la régulation de la communication dans de nombreux pays. Et cette autorité a pour objectif, a pour mandat de s'assurer que pendant le scrutin électoral, tous les partis politiques en lice pour le pouvoir, pour la compétition, ont le même accès aux médias d'État. Et pour ce qui est de la campagne électorale également, pour ce qui est des ressources et des espaces publics, il y a des réglementations en vigueur afin que tous les partis politiques puissent avoir un accès équitable à ces ressources et aux espaces publics. L'intégrité du processus. Des garanties efficaces doivent prévenir la fraude électorale, les ingérences numériques et la manipulation des votes. Donc, à ce niveau également, comme vous le savez, il est important qu'il y ait des mécanismes, un dispositif au niveau de chaque pays pour garantir l'intégrité du processus électoral afin qu'il n'y ait pas de contestation ou de violence post-électorale. Les recours effectifs, il faut qu'il y ait des mécanismes accessibles, crédibles et impartiaux qui permettent le règlement rapide des contentieux électoraux. Donc, les citoyens doivent disposer de ces mécanismes-là afin de les aider dans le cheminement vers la fin du processus électoral, c'est-à-dire après les résultats, qu'ils puissent contester ou qu'ils puissent en tout cas affirmer de la crédibilité de ces résultats. Nous allons à présent parler des principes démocratiques et substantiels. Ces principes, je m'en vais les lister afin que vous puissiez les avoir et qu'on puisse en discuter dans la deuxième partie de ce séminaire. Il s'agit de l'inclusivité et de l'égalité de participation. Ce principe recouvre le suffrage universel, l'égalité de genre, l'engagement des jeunes ainsi que la participation des personnes vivant avec le handicap. La tolérance politique et la paix, le respect des droits de l'opposition, la non-violence et le déroulement pacifique des campagnes sont essentiels au jeu démocratique. L'éducation civique et le choix éclairé. Les citoyens doivent être suffisamment informés, pour ne pas dire outillés, pour exercer un vote libre et conscient. Et c'est pour cela que ici, on demande aux organisations de la société civile de se saisir de cette opportunité que présentent les élections pour véritablement sensibiliser ou éduquer les populations afin qu'elles puissent connaître quand il s'agit d'un scrutin référendaire, que les populations puissent connaître le contenu des constitutions, qu'elles puissent voter en connaissance de cause. Quand il s'agit des élections présidentielles, législatives ou communales, que les citoyens puissent en tout cas connaître les différents projets de société qui sont proposés par chaque parti politique et que ces populations puissent voter en sachant exactement ce qu'elles sont en train de choisir. La transparence du financement politique. Il s'agit également d'un point très important. La régulation et la transparence du financement des campagnes contribuent à réduire la corruption et l'influence induite des intérêts particuliers. À ce niveau, le débat en Afrique fait rage parce que, comme on le constate, les partis au pouvoir ont tendance à puiser dans la caisse de l'État pour mener les campagnes. Et ici, on parle par moment de campagne déguisée parce que la période de la campagne est définie par la loi, mais vous avez des partis au pouvoir qui, quand ils sont candidats, quand ils sont en tout cas en train de conquérir également le pouvoir politique, utilisent des canaux. Ils utilisent des canaux, donc il peut s'agir d'inaugurer ou de mener des actions en faveur des populations en utilisant les moyens de l'État, mais en le mettant sous le couvert des actions du gouvernement. Mais on sait effectivement qu'il ne s'agit pas seulement d'une action du gouvernement parce qu'on se demande pourquoi cette action est menée à telle période précise. On se rend compte que les partis qui sont au pouvoir ont tendance à utiliser ces moments avant l'ouverture de la campagne pour, en tout cas, mener plusieurs actions pour attirer beaucoup de l'assentiment de la population. Et ce sont des choses à combattre et à dénoncer parce qu'à ce moment, les partis de l'opposition n'ont pas de l'accès équitable aux ressources de la campagne parce qu'ils ne disposent pas du pouvoir d'État et ils n'arrivent pas à puiser, comme on le dit, dans les caisses de l'État. L'acceptation des résultats légitimes. Les acteurs politiques doivent s'engager à respecter les résultats reconnus comme crédibles et à garantir des transitions pacifiques. Ici également, le débat est toujours ouvert parce qu'il s'agit de savoir de ce qu'on met dans le concept résultat reconnu comme crédible. Parce qu'à ce niveau, il y a toujours des contestations qui naissent du fait que les acteurs politiques ne se sont pas accordés sur la définition de la crédibilité véritablement des élections. Nous allons ensuite passer aux enjeux démocratiques et à ce niveau, nous allons parler d'un certain nombre de principes, à savoir la mise en œuvre et les principaux défis, donc en termes d'enjeux, nous avons la conformité sélective. Nombre d'États ratifient les instruments continentaux sans les incorporer réellement dans leur ordre juridique interne ou que, par exemple, respectent de manière régulière les obligations de rapport prévues par la CADEC. La CADEC, donc la Charte africaine de la démocratie, des élections et de la gouvernance. À ce niveau, je peux vous assurer qu'à ce jour, donc en 2025, nous avons en tout, sur les 55 États que compte l'Union africaine, nous avons 46 pays qui ont signé la CADEC. Nous avons 39 qui l'ont ratifié et nous sommes seulement à 2 pays qui ont soumis les rapports. Il y a beaucoup de travail à faire à ce niveau et je pense que nous devons tous, en tout cas, exercer une certaine pression afin que les États puissent respecter leurs engagements vis-à-vis des instruments qui sont ratifiés. La captation institutionnelle. Les organes de gestion des élections et certaines juridictions demeurent exposés à des pressions et interférences politiques. Les OGE, comme on le dit, dans plusieurs pays d'Afrique, souffrent de ce manque d'indépendance du fait de leur composition. Du fait de leur composition, dans certains pays, le président a la possibilité de même nommer des membres. Nous avons ceux qui viennent de la société civile, etc. Je pense que leur composition déjà pose des difficultés. Le contournement des limitations de mandat, des révisions constitutionnelles opportunistes venant prolonger indûment les mandats contreviennent notamment à l'article 23.5 de la CADEC. Et cet article dit tout amendement ou révision des constitutions ou des instruments juridiques qui portent atteinte au principe de l'alternance démocratique sont considérés comme un changement anticonstitutionnel de gouvernement. Donc, à ce niveau, nous avons constaté depuis un certain temps des révisions des constitutions qui permettent à des chefs d'État de rester longtemps au pouvoir. Et plus ingénieux encore, certains ont même réussi à faire sauter l'obligation d'organiser des élections. Maintenant, ils ne sont plus obligés de passer par cette étape, on va dire, stressante. Ils vont tout simplement se faire élire au niveau de l'Assemblée nationale où ils sont sûrs que leur parti politique a la majorité. Donc, c'est vraiment des pratiques qui sont à dénoncer parce que ces pratiques également causent beaucoup d'instabilité dans les pays et ces pratiques vont à l'encontre de la CADEC, qui est un instrument juridique qui doit s'appliquer entièrement. Les violences électorales et la désinformation. Les violences électorales et la désinformation, la faiblesse des dispositifs de prévention, la circulation des discours haineux et la manipulation numérique affectent la crédibilité des scrutins. L'inégalité également des ressources, l'accès asymétrique, comme on le disait tout à l'heure, au financement de campagne et l'usage abusif des ressources de l'État forcent le principe d'égalité des chances. Les mécanismes de sanction peu robustes. Les mesures prévues, entre autres, à l'article 25 de la CADEC sont rarement mises en œuvre de manière cohérente et dissuasive. Je pense que ce débat est en cours et c'est un débat qui est mené à chaque fois. Et l'Union africaine a réussi, en tout cas, enfin, a reçu à plusieurs reprises des plaintes venant de différents acteurs sur l'application des différentes sanctions qui sont imposées au niveau des États. Nous allons à présent parler de bonnes pratiques parce que tout n'est pas, comme on le dit, sombre en Afrique. Il y a quelques bonnes pratiques qui nous donnent de l'espoir sur l'avenir de ce continent et qui nous disent également ce qu'il faut faire afin qu'on puisse avoir un continent stable et pacifié. Donc, pour ce qui est des bonnes pratiques, nous avons le Ghana, par exemple, et le Cap-Vert qui s'illustrent avec les dynamiques d'alternance pacifique, de consolidation institutionnelle et de respect des règles du jeu démocratique. Vous avez également le Kenya et le Malawi qui témoignent d'une montée en puissance de l'indépendance du pouvoir judiciaire dans le règlement des litiges électoraux. Au Nigeria, la loi électorale de 2022 renforce la transparence technologique et la surveillance citoyenne, notamment par une meilleure intégration des outils numériques dans la gestion des résultats. On a de plus en plus confiance à l'outil numérique en se disant qu'à ce moment, l'homme n'a pas une action véritable sur les résultats et que cela peut en tout cas permettre d'avoir des résultats acceptés par les différents acteurs. En ce qui concerne les perspectives, alors, les questions émergentes, comme je l'ai intitulé, et perspectives d'avenir. Plusieurs tendances nouvelles configurent les enjeux des élections démocratiques en Afrique. La gouvernance numérique, on en parlait tout à l'heure, et les technologies électorales. Le recours croissant à la biométrie, à la transmission électronique des résultats et aux réseaux sociaux pour la mobilisation politique impose un renforcement de la cybercriminalité et des dispositifs de lutte contre la désinformation. Parce que ici, vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que les réseaux sociaux, c'est comme on le dit, un couteau, c'est un couteau à double tranchant. Ici, si on utilise l'informatique, on utilise la technologie au niveau des élections, il faut en contrepartie se doter de systèmes vigoureux de lutte contre la cybercriminalité et de contrôle de la désinformation. Les scrutins en contexte fragile. L'instabilité persistante dans les pays comme le Mali, pour ne pas dire le Sahel, hein, parce que vous avez un certain nombre de pays qui vivent les mêmes réalités. Le Soudan, la République démocratique du Congo, par exemple, compliquent l'organisation d'élections inclusives et crédibles. Vous avez dans ces pays plusieurs difficultés. Les pays qui sont fractionnés, qui sont, en tout cas, qui n'arrivent pas à se mettre ensemble. Donc, on se pose des questions à savoir comment ou en quelle année ces pays pourraient, en tout cas, penser à organiser des élections. Peut-être qu'il y a plus d'espoir en RDC que dans les pays du Sahel, où vous avez des gouvernements qui sont en place et qui estiment que la priorité n'est pas l'organisation des élections, mais plutôt la lutte contre le terrorisme. Donc, c'est ici une question de priorité. L'agence citoyenne et renouvellement générationnel. Les mouvements de jeunes et de femmes revendiquent de plus en plus une reddition des comptes approfondie et une gouvernance plus représentative. Vous avez dans plusieurs pays, notamment en tout cas, on va dire en Afrique centrale, des régimes qui sont en place depuis plusieurs décennies et la jeunesse je pense, dans certains pays, souhaitent la reddition des comptes afin qu'elle puisse également avoir son mot à dire dans la gestion du pays. La judiciarisation des élections. La place croissante des juridictions dans l'arbitrage des résultats accroît l'importance de leur indépendance et de leurs compétences, ainsi que des procédures contentieuses crédibles. Les mécanismes continentaux de contrôle. La création d'un mécanisme africain de justice électorale et le renforcement d'un conseil électoral de l'Union africaine pourraient améliorer la conformité des élections ou des États, pardon, aux normes de la CADEC. Donc ici, ce sont des propositions qui sont faites au niveau des États, mais également au niveau de l'Union africaine afin qu'on puisse aider les pays à se conformer aux normes de la CADEC. Le rôle émergent de l'intelligence artificielle. On ne peut pas ne pas parler de l'intelligence artificielle en 2025 peut contribuer à l'observation des élections et à l'analyse des données électorales. Mais elle ouvre aussi de nouveaux risques en matière de désinformation, de micro-ciblage politique et de manipulation des données. Donc, l'IA peut présenter des opportunités. C'est une opportunité que nous avons avec nous, mais il faut également qu'on puisse mettre des garde-fous afin de s'assurer qu'on ne tombe pas dans un certain nombre de pièges comme la désinformation ou la manipulation des données. Donc, il faut vraiment dompter cet instrument et l'utiliser de façon efficiente. Alors, pour ce qui est des conclusions, nous avons les principes régissant les élections démocratiques en Afrique sont désormais largement codifiés au sein d'instruments et de déclarations continentales. Nous avons parlé de ces déclarations et de ces instruments juridiques plus haut. Le principal défi ne réside plus dans la formulation normative, mais dans l'application cohérente et l'effectivité des mécanismes de suivi et de sanction. La pérennisation des élections démocratiques passe par le renforcement des institutions indépendantes, la protection de l'espace civique et un véritable engagement politique en faveur de transition pacifique du pouvoir. En définitive, l'avenir démocratique du continent dépendra moins de la fréquence des scrutins que de leur conformité aux principes de souveraineté populaire, d'intégrité des processus et d'inclusion de toutes les composantes de la société. Ici, je pense qu'il est clair que nous sommes passés de la nécessité d'avoir des élections de façon régulière pour considérer qu'un pays est démocratique vers la nécessité d'avoir des élections de qualité et nous avons un certain nombre d'adjectifs que nous mettons dans le concept qualité. Donc, c'est l'intégrité ici du processus qui est en jeu. Alors, je vais m'arrêter à ce niveau, pour la présentation. J'ai souhaité que cette présentation soit claire parce que j'ai considéré qu'il s'agit ici d'un séminaire et que pour un séminaire, nous devons avoir juste une présentation et avoir plus de temps pour les échanges parce que il y a un certain nombre de concepts qui sont définis ici, qui sont présentés ici, que vous connaissez, auxquels vous êtes familiers et la partie interactive va nous permettre de pouvoir adapter ou en tout cas de pouvoir regarder ces concepts et de les analyser sur le plan de ce que nous avons en face de nous dans nos différents états. Donc, Virginia et Candice, je m'en vais vous remettre la parole afin que nous puissions ouvrir les débats et avoir suffisamment de temps pour en discuter. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Abibata, for that very comprehensive and enlightening discussion of this important topic and the important work of the African Institute in promoting democratic elections in Africa, which is the very foundation for promoting democracy and good governance in Africa. The first question, what concrete steps is the African Union taking to prevent constitutional manipulation and ensure real accountability for leaders who undermine democratic governance? This is a very important topic. We have a leading expert on this topic and someone who can really share her experience with the African Union. So please add your questions. So that is the first one, and then we have a couple more, and there will be more coming in.
Good. Thank you so much, Sheru, for this question. So what are the concrete steps that African Union is taking to prevent constitutional manipulation? This is very interesting because one of our binding instruments at the AU is the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. And this charter is defining what we call unconstitutional change of government. At Article 23.5, it is clearly saying that any manipulation of the Constitution that is against the democratic principle of alternance is considered as an unconstitutional change of government. But I want to agree with those who believe that the African Union is more focusing on anything like the intervention, anything that has to do with the intervention of the military to when the military is taking over the power, then you can have a reaction from the African Union Commission. You will have the reaction that will come from the Peace and Security Council condemning expanding the country. But when it comes to the manipulation of the constitution itself, then they are quiet. So we tend to call it here at the technical level, these are the civilian, this is like, it can be considered like a civilian coup. So it is an unconstitutional change of government, and the African Union must look into that and must also condemn it at the same way they condemn the military intervention. So here, we've been discussing that internally, and we came up with some suggestion. And I know the Peace and Security Council in 2018 requested that the African Union develop guidelines for constitutional amendment. Those guidelines are supposed to be used as a carnival by member states when they want to amend the constitution. But here again come the discussion around how will the member states appreciate this? Because at the same time, you are talking about the guidelines, which is the non-binding, it is a non-binding instrument. This is the soft law. So is it something that is going to really help? The discussion is still going on. So I think at least from my point of view, at least let us have these guidelines in place. So we have something on the ground, and then we can move progressively into the development or maybe the amendment. Why not? Why can't we amend the ACDEC, the African Charter, to make it stronger when it comes to the what I call a civilian coup? So I believe that we can also say that at the governance level, we have so many actions that we undertake, but I just want to confess that what we are doing is not enough. And African Union is focusing more on the military coup. They don't look at the constitutional manipulation as something that should be considered as a case of UCG, despite the fact that it is in the ACDEC defined as a UCG, that is an unconstitutional change of government. And that is also something sad, and we need to really work on it. The second step of your question, the second phase of your question is saying that how do you ensure accountability for leaders who undermine democratic governance? That is also another problem. I had a conversation last week with somebody who was saying that at the African Union level, one of the key problems that we may have is even the election of the leadership. Because the time where you had presidents, like former president running the organization, you could see a difference between the way they run the organization and the way someone who is not a former president can run the organization. Because a minister of foreign affairs cannot talk to a president and tell him what you are doing is wrong. I'm not sure that is possible, but that is what they want the leadership to be doing. I think they are doing it at their level, but are the countries listening? I am not quite sure. So there is a problem with this, and as we always say, the elephant in the room is called sovereignty, because member states will always tell you we're sovereign countries. We cannot allow an organization to come and tell us what to do. But at the same time, you want the African Union to be an organization that is helping you. But if you need the African Union to really function, you need to give them all the cards, all everything, so that they can really work the way they're supposed to do. So there are a lot of challenges. I agree with you, and we are not doing much in that area. Thank you.
If I may, Ben Kyoko mentioned yesterday that there is an important anniversary coming up for the Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. Do you think that there is much hope for amending or strengthening the Charter?
Yes, so this conversation, we have been having this conversation for the past, I spent 8 years here in Addis, running this unit called Constitutionalism and Rule of Law. And when I came, I met a study that was undertaken on the gaps existing in the ACDEC. And so that study has been there for almost 8 years or more than that. And after that, we have so many meetings. Even the Peace and Security Council know that, and they always say that we need to, make the ACDEC stronger. And I think in August this year, there was a high-level meeting, that tried to review all the African Union instruments. And one of the conclusion was that we need to look into, some of the instruments like the AgDec to make them stronger, to make them efficient. But yeah, it is quite difficult because there is always a gap between what you want at the technical level and what you're able to do, taking into consideration the political will and the other side. So at the A, you have two levels, the political and the technical level. So I believe that at some point they might be forced, to amend the AgDec, given all what we are seeing on the continent. But at the same time, I think it will take some time because it's not going to happen like tomorrow.
Well, before I continue, thank you for devoting so many years, and I hope they listen to you because Ben also mentioned the importance of strengthening the gaps. So turning to the next question, please. What course of action should be taken in the event of non-compliance with the set election deadline?
Thank you. So I think this is also an important question. It is also coming like I see it like the constitutional amendment also that is taking place and where the AU is quite silent. The instruments are there and they are clear enough with the necessity to comply to the dates, to the deadlines, to organize elections. But countries, member states always have, they always have something that they will put on the table where the AU cannot contest. During the COVID time, for instance, let me go back to COVID time, 2019, 2020, and all up to even 2022. 2022, yes. There are some countries that were supposed to organize election, but they just use COVID as an excuse because after some time they were able to, they could organize the election, but they use it as an excuse to say, okay, COVID is happening, we can't organize elections. And, they try to postpone the elections. And at some point, you just have to tell them, no, you have to stop because there is a deadline and there are some measures that were put in place to fight against COVID. So you could also have your election freely. But yeah, so there are some countries that are not complying with that necessity, and they at the AU level they always remind using the instrument that they have, but you don't have this strong, statement that will come up and say, okay, this country A, you have to comply, you have to, you don't have that kind of terminology within the AU. We always try to do some diplomacy. We also have what we call silence diplomacy, that is at the leadership level. So we believe at the technical level that the chairperson will take his phone and call maybe a member state and say, okay, look, this is going on. You're supposed to have the election at this date. You are trying to postpone them. It is against your own constitution. Try to do something about it. We believe it is happening because they said we have some silent diplomacy going on, but I can't confess, I can't attest that this is really happening. Yeah.
One of the issues that Ben mentioned yesterday was the limited reports submitted by states in terms of their compliance with that charter. And he was saying that if states don't submit this report, it's very difficult for the African Union to take action. Are there any ways to encourage states to submit these reports so that you have information that you can act on?
Thank you. Just before this seminar, I was having this same conversation with a colleague and brother that from the adoption or the entry into force of the AgDec, you only have two states that have reported. And I think at the IAU level, we try to talk to the member state to understand what are the challenges that they are facing. Why are you not reporting? And one of the answers we got is that we don't know how to do that. So we came up with a sample, how do you call it, with a frame, like a sample that they should use to report. guidelines on how to report. We came up with this, we share with the member states, but we are still having 2 countries that have reported. And some are also complaining that the AU have so many reports that they are expecting member states to deliver on, that we need to harmonize, we need to give them more time. There are always excuses. I call that excuses. So the countries that have ratified the 39, only 2 have reported, and those reports have been there for almost, I think, for more than almost a decade now, So at the same time, I agree with him that if you don't have the member state reporting on how they implement the ACDEC, how do you really, work with them? But at the same time, also we could say that the AU is always at least, working with countries that have ratified the ACDEC, considering that you have ratified, so it applies fully to you. Because if you have to wait for them to report on it, then you will not get enough to do with the member states. So at least when they have ratified, we take them accountable for anything that they have to do within the ACDEC.
May I ask, when was the model adopted? Is this a recent guideline and model for the reporting?
It's not that recent. I think it has been in place for the past, let's say around 5 years, the past 5 years. So we have this guideline in place that member state could use to report on.
Maybe we need to have a workshop on that or a seminar on that. We can consider that.
Definitely.
Continuing with the questions, what mechanisms are available to the African Union to prevent states parties from violating Article 23 of the Charter without infringing on the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of states or the obligation to protect local populations from human rights election violations?
Yeah, very interesting question. I think we also responded partly to this question in the first answer that we provided, to say that there are some, there is a lot of work that is being doing at the African Union level. If you take the Governance and Conflict Prevention Directorate, you have so many divisions, you have so many units that are working on a daily basis to ensure that, we have a good governance. We have a member states trying to compile to democratic principles, not to violate the Article 23, because there are a lot of things that comes into before. You have many early warning signs that you will get before you go to the unconstitutional change of government. So there is a lot that the AU is doing on that, but I think it is not just enough. It is not just enough. We have this conversation that we always have. We call them Accra Reflection Forum on Unconstitutional Change of Government. We started that in 2022. I think then we had like 4 countries suspended. And then we had the second Accra Reflection Forum in 2024, and then we had 6 countries suspended. And now next year, we're going to have the 3rd edition of the same forum, and we are currently having, I think, 6 or 7 countries suspended. So the situation is not getting better. That is why I don't want I don't want us to just discuss on what we are doing. We are doing a lot, but from the data that you have, when I give you the information about the member states that are suspended from 2022 up to these days, you know that there is a gap. There is a lot to be doing that we need to do in this area. So. And I also said that one of the key problems that we have is this issue of sovereignty, because member states will tell you that you have to respect the principle of non-interference. But AU has gone beyond this conversation. Now we are not just doing non-interference. We are saying non-interference, but non-indifference. Non-indifference also. That is another concept. So AU is trying to go beyond all these things to try to really, get involved into the member state, we get engaged, do some engagement with member states so that we can deliver democracy, and we can also sensitize or protect local population, and also prevent electoral violation. And there are some instruments that were developed by the organization, as we said, in this regard, and we need to make sure they are being respected.
Well, you've answered a question that often comes up in these seminars. People are also often asking, what does the AU do about enforcement? This is a very powerful enforcement mechanism. And the other simple point that I would make is states, in fact, exercise their sovereignty when they agree to a treaty. And then
Yes,
there are consequences. So I think when you ask a state to comply with its treaty obligations, its commitments it's made to the African Union, I personally would not see that as an interference. I personally would see that as a gentle reminder to respect your obligations, but I know it's not that easy. Okay, the next
yes.
question is a very interesting one, and perhaps it goes to the very heart of these matters that we are discussing. Are electoral democracy and good governance sufficient to ensure peace?
Yes. So I can't see the question on the chat, but let me note it. Are electoral.
Yes, it says, first of all, it says, thank you for your presentation. It says, in Africa, are electoral democracy and good governance sufficient to ensure peace?
So there are so many there are so many issues that are contributing to the instability of the continent. You have now the surge of the terrorism in the Sahel. You have so many other issues that are also in place, but at least if you have an electoral democracy and you have the respect for good governance, I believe you can contribute to the peace. And there are a lot of issues that we had on the continent, that we witnessed in the continent, that we could avoid if at least we were able to respect these two principles. But this is not enough. These are not the only things that you need to ensure peace and stability in Africa. You need more. You need more. You need to fight effectively against terrorism. You need to work with, to work and ensure that people are, having a better life, because they are complaining about so many issues. But this is also part of democracy. But I think the one of the key aspects that is missing is the efficiency in the fight against terrorism. But also that in that area, there are some discussion that there are some people that will tell you that the surge that you have in the Sahel is also done. Yeah, it's also there because you have a lot of issues when it comes to democracy and governance. So terrorism has become the voice of the voiceless. So it is quite tricky, but at least let us have this principle respect on the continent, and we can have some stability on the continent.
There are a couple of questions relating to AI. Okay, so actually, and they seem to be taking two sides of this. The first comment is that election is a tedious process, especially before, during, and after. In most cases, using AI to register voters can be challenging. In the case when the machine has malfunctioned, how do you rectify the damage? Does that mean that everyone is represented when there is a breakdown or overloading of the machine or AI, or when AI is not functioning? As a related question, which also concerns AI in elections, the question is, what measures should be taken by the African Union to prevent the intrusion of AI into the electoral process. So I guess the basic question is, how do you see the role of AI in elections? And can this be helpful? Can it be useful? Are there protections that need to be in place?
Thank you. It is very interesting because 2025, I think it is the year of AI, and you can't do without it. AI has some positive aspects because it is an opportunity that we have in Africa to try and have some elections that are credible. At least people will see that it is not human hands that are being used to count the votes, or to register the people, but at least you have a machine that is in place that is doing it. So it has some advantages, but at the same times, the AI also is an instrument that you really need to make sure you control it. You control it fully. You own it fully. What I mean is that you have to, the AI has some bad side because AI can be used to promote the disinformation, to promote a lot of things. So at the same time, the AI is having this positive aspect. At the same time, you need to make sure that you have some things in place to fight against the cyber criminality and all other things, because you can get some hacker that can hack the system, and that can affect the electoral process. And as rightly the participant said, if there is a problem or the machine stop working, what is your plan B? So I advise that there should always be a backup. There should always be a backup. I spoke last week. I was in Libreville with the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court of Guinea-Conakry that came for a learning visit. And one of the information that they gave us is that they had the same problem. Like at some point, the machine just stopped working, and the one of the center got burned. So the good thing is that they had a backup. I think not in the same city, in another city, in another place that they were able to use. But that is also another issue because people will ask you, are you sure that the backup is, real? Like if the incidents happen at 3 and then you are giving them, you are using your backup, are you sure that from 2 p.m. to 3, the information that were registered were saved? That is another issue. But I think before using or expanding AI in Africa, the citizens must be sensitized. They must be educated. They must know. They must trust AI. And for that, you have to show them the safeguard that you have put in place so that they can trust the process and also trust the technology that you'll be using. That is also one of the key elements because people don't know much about AI. So they will come and they will tell you, okay, for you to vote, just click on this thing. By the time you click on it, it will say that you've cast your vote. But my grandmother, who is from the village, who doesn't have a phone, a cell phone, you give her a machine or a tab, you tell her, okay, just touch on this button and you've cast your vote. She will not believe you. So there is a need to also sensitize the population on it. And we should not rush. We should use the EI, but we should not rush. In Africa, we should take time to sensitize. We should take time to make sure that we really know how to use it. We should take time to make sure we have serious backup system before we really start implementing. Else, we will have the side effect of using the EI on the continent.
That is very, very important, the points you made. The education, so people trust the system. Education, so people know how to use the system. And also testing it, not relying on it completely, but doing sort of a pilot project. I have to say that Africa is not alone in having problems with AI. I think many countries do. And I just recently voted in my own country, and it's a very strange thing. I'm used to a pencil and you check the box, and this time they told me to do this and then put it in a computer, and it's something to get used to. But it does have great promise if it can be regulated and if there's safeguards. The next question. In the context of the African Union norms on democracy and governance, How can constitutional design and reform ensure that electoral processes are not only free and fair, but also genuinely reflective of the people's will, while safeguarding against manipulation and erosion of democratic institutions?
You come again? Sorry.
Absolutely. This is the last question in the list if you want to look at it in the Q&A. In the context of the African Union norms on democracy and governance,
Oh, I have the
how
question.
how can constitutional design, did you find it? You found it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a very interesting, multifaceted question.
Yes. So the question is, in the context of African Union norms on democracy and governance, how can constitutional design and reform ensure that electoral processes are not only free and fair, but also genuinely reflective of the people's will while safeguarding against manipulation and erosion of democratic institutions? I think it is a question and an answer at the same time, or I mean, I can hear I can hear that this, I can feel that this question is coming from the heart. Like this is what should be doing, this is what we should be doing, this is what we should be having in Africa, making sure that constitutions are designed in a way that they really ensure electoral process are free, they are fair, but they are also reflecting the people's will. So in the context of the African Union, I think, as I mentioned before, one of the things that we may have that can, I would not call it a game changer, but just to say that one of the most important steps that the AU could have is to make sure these guidelines on constitutional amendment are in place. By the time you have these guidelines in place, you can guide the countries on how should you amend your constitution? What should be the content of a constitution? In which frequency the constitutional amendment should intervene? So in this point, the second point, what should be the content of the constitution? You make sure that you put all the things that are important to guarantee free and fair elections, but also to have safeguarding measures against manipulation and erosion of the democratic institution. So this is something that is missing at the African Union level because you don't find it clearly, stated in other instruments. It is important to come up with at least these guidelines that will, help to address this issue.
You answered the question that was in my mind. I was wondering if the African Union has created models or guidelines or is working on this. I understand it's difficult because you have 55 AU member states with different national legal systems. So is this, but it sounds like this could be very helpful to come up with model guidelines. But then again, you'll run into state sovereignty. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that this is something that is worth preparing a model law or guidelines for addressing democracy and democratic elections, especially in constitutions?
Yes, I fully agree. I fully believe that there is a need to have these guidelines in place. Yes, African Union have 55 countries. You have a lot of guidelines that are in place, but you can come up with something that can address all the issues that are cross-cutting around among the constitutions that you have in place in Africa. So this is something that we should do. And this is something that was also decided by the Peace and Security Council. That is one of the most important organ of the peace and security mechanism at the African Union level. So it is important to implement that decision that is there since 2018. That is saying that the African Union should come up with guidelines on constitutional amendment. I agree with you that you by the time you develop that, you have to also now get the buy-in from the member state, and you run into this issue of sovereignty. But at some point, we need to get an organization that is strong enough to come up with an instrument and say, okay, this is what we believe should be used in Africa, and this is what we are recommending to all member states. So it's something that we definitely need to work on, and we definitely need to have it in place. Yeah, it will help a lot.
And just to clarify, you said that in 2018, the Peace and Security Council recognized the importance of doing something like this.
Yes, there is a decision.
Oh, very good. Well, I think you just answered the question of another participant, which was what mechanism does the AU recommend for harmonizing national electoral laws with the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance to reduce disputes and ensure consistency across the continent? This is the second to the last question. So in terms of harmonizing national electoral laws, what is the AU approach to that? I think you mentioned that there are some model laws. How?
Yes, so it might be a bit difficult to, harmonize all the electoral law. But one of the things that the AU can come up with is guidelines. I know there are guidelines on elections during a pandemic that were developed. There are some guidelines that are in place for election observation. There are a lot of instruments, but we did not come up with the real document that we need. That is, will be helping the harmonization of national electoral laws. The ACDEC is trying to speak to that. I think in Article 2 and 3, if I'm not wrongly, but we really need to come up with something stronger, something that speaks specifically to it, the same way we are doing it with the guidelines on constitutional amendment. It can be part of it. Can be part of it. We can think of how to incorporate that into those guidelines, but as I said, you really need a strong political commitment for that to happen.
It seems like the two would be related. If you're talking about harmonizing constitutions, the major national electoral laws are often in the Constitution. So, as you said, this could be addressed at the same time. Let's see. Okay.
I think there is a question before. Why? Yes.
Do you want to take that one? Why
No,
is
no, yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about taking the question, why is it that few leaders in Africa would amend their constitutions for third term to continuously hold their offices against the will and aspirations of their people, and which could be seen as a recipe for chaos in a constitutional democracy? Yet the African Union sits allowing such situations to take place.
Yes. I think as we said, that the African Union level, there is a lot to be done because you have reactions when it comes to the military coup. You don't have reaction when it comes to constitutional amendments. Some countries have amended their constitutions, and if you take the case of Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, in 2020, they amended the constitution, and then the president had already 2 terms. And the Constitution said the president cannot stand beyond 2 terms. But what they did after amending the Constitution, they said, no, now we are having a new republic. So we are considering the next term, not as a third term, but as the first term within the new republic. And in 2025, the president had his 4th term. According to the international community, we call it 4th term, but internally they call it 2nd term. These are some of the things that you see around the continent that are creating, as you said, the chaos, because the citizens may not be happy with that. But at the same time, also, if you put yourself in the shoes of the AU, one of the challenge that you may have is when the countries goes for referendum, because the referendum is the expression of the popular will, and then the people vote yes. So you can't go and say, okay, the people who have voted are not, they are not being well sensitized. They don't know what they are voting, because here also come the issue of the education of citizens. Do they really know what they vote? Do they really know the content of the constitution? That is one of the issue. We know how elections are organized on the continent. People just go out because they like this leader, or because this leader has promised to build some streets. He will come and make the promise this year, and then next year or after the election, he will just disappear and come back after 5 years. So people need to be well educated in these kind of issues, so that they can own the process and they can fill the gap that you are having at the AU level, where the AU is not able to address this kind of issue. The citizens themselves can address it. I have some passion about it because I have a civil society background as well. So yeah, I believe that they can also play a role and force the organization, the African Union, to act on it. But when the citizens are quiet, when you have a referendum that has been organized and the yes won like 95% and the no won like 5%, and then they will tell you, okay, this is a new republic. So the referendum is bringing down everything. We have to restart the process. I'm standing for my first term. There is no much that the AU can do, but technically and scientifically, this is against the democratic principle of alternance, and it needs to be addressed. And the AU is quite silent when it comes to this kind of manipulation. The AU is more focusing on military coup. If there is a military coup right now, by tomorrow, the peace and security will sit, they will have a session and they will suspend the country. But when it is a manipulation of the constitution, people are quiet because there are so many considerations, which is sad.
This is one of the gaps that Ben Kyoko mentioned in the charter yesterday. So you were saying that civil society could
Yeah.
play an important role, because there's often a problem of lack of information and a problem of misinformation. And to be able to have neutral information is extremely, extremely important. There's a question here about the role of the United Nations in terms of elections in Africa, which is interesting because in many of the seminars, the participants are really focusing on African solutions to African problems in accordance with the Pan-African vision. But the question is that this person would like to know why the UN can't follow up on elections in Africa closely, send their representatives in some of the polling stations to follow up and wait for the organizations to report on them. I know there have been electoral observations from the outside before, but what is your view on that? Is it helpful to have the UN come in and observe?
think here it also depends on the mandate of the UN, because I know that in many countries you will have the UN supporting some activities before prior to the elections, to trying to contribute, to a free and fair elections. But you don't see the UN, playing the front line role when it comes to election, because this process is owned by Africa and more by the African Union and also the REX. If you have an election happening in West Africa, you have ECOWAS, you have in Southern Africa, you have SADC and so on. So UN also has, I think, it's part of its mandate and the mandate that they're also giving to their representations on the ground. They try to have some initiatives, but to really observe the election and all that, I don't see them on the ground. We always go for election observation. You meet the AU, of course, you have the AU, you have the REX, you have the Francophonie, you have other think tanks that are in place, but the UN can, facilitate. I know for the referendum that took place in Gabon in last year, November, the UN was able to support the setting of a situation room. There were some civil society groups that were in place. They were well organized. I think there were up to 250 civil societies, and the UN was able to come up with some funds to, give them the opportunity to have a situation room. And they also deploy, I think, so many observers. I can't remember the figures on the ground that were able to, come up with data, come up with information that were, trying that the situation room in the capital city was trying to treat. But the UN doesn't always go in the front line. They will go through some organization, through some civil societies group, but that is also opening the discussion about the way the member states see the UN actions. Sometimes they will say, okay, we don't want interference of external actors. So
Right.
yeah, that's also another issue that we need to address. But the UN is there, they are in place, they are trying to support civil society groups, they try to organize some activities prior to the elections. But yeah, you don't see them deploying observers, like calling them UN oftenly, not oftenly.
Right. I can see the benefits of having them support the local civil society groups, but I also can understand the argument that people don't want outsiders. Jimmy Carter, the late Jimmy Carter, was occasionally invited uh, as an independent observer. The country would invite him, and that's quite different, I think. Okay, you mentioned the importance of youth. So this is a question about the role of youth. First of all, what is expected from the young generation, specifically the youth, in promoting the rule of law in Africa, in African jurisprudence?
Great.
And then
I
there's a part two. So do you want both parts, or you want to answer that one first?
let's start with this. Let's start with
Perfect.
this.
Very
Yeah,
good.
so youth, as I said early, should definitely come up and own, this process. But at the same time, we're calling on you to play a key role. We also need to make sure they have all the tools. They know how to go about things, how to play this role that we are calling them to play in Africa. And at the AU level, we currently running a project that we call the AU project for the inclusion and the mainstreaming of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance into school curricula. I'm personally running this project, and what we've done, we took the ACDEC because this is at least you may say that there are some gaps in the ACDEC, but you have some beautiful things in the ACDEC. ACDEC is telling you how to promote democracy, what are the democracy principles and all that. So what we did is to take the ACDEC and then try to see, okay, what are the key thematics that you can draw from the ACDEC? I think we came up with like 18 thematics. And we now took the schools that we have, the levels that we have in the African school. So you have the nursery, and then you have the primary, you have the secondary, and then I think the lycée just before the university level. So we try to develop some lessons that we call the manuals for the learners that is adjusted or is adapted to each level. For the nursery, you have some manuals that are speaking or that can be used by this level of students. We know that at that level, you can't expect the kids to be reading when they are 3 or 4, but you have some cartoons that have been designed there that they can see, and also that will also tell them what is democracy, what is elections, what is representation. You have to use the cartoons. We did the same for the primary and all the other levels. So we did manual for all the learners that are being built based on the content of the ACDEC, but is adapted to the level, because you can't go and start discussing constitutionalism when you are in front of a child that is like 12 years. So we try to adjust the language as well. So we also did the same for the teachers because at the same time you are, sensitizing the learners, you also need to work with the teachers. So we develop guides for the teachers for each level. So when the teacher takes his guide and then the student take the manual, they can follow it. They can follow it. They will know how to follow it, and then they can also deliver the lessons, and the student will be able to learn. So we developed these projects, and currently we are having the piloting phase of the project. We want to know how it is working. So we did the first launch in West Africa last year in Cote d'Ivoire, and we selected two pilot countries. And those pilot countries are Cote d'Ivoire and Guinea-Bissau. So the two countries are trying to include these programs into the school curricula. So they develop the school curricula based on what we are giving them that is coming from the ACDEC. And I can tell you, because I've been in those two countries, for some of them, this is really helpful. It is helping them to enhance the level of the education in their countries. So they are really grateful for this initiative that is in place. So currently we are going, I think, in December 15 to Cote d'Ivoire to develop a pool, assess. We need to assess, to evaluate and assess the level of implementation of this program into the national curriculum, because we believe that that is also another way to educate the young generation. But we are also conscious to the fact that it is not only at school that you have youth, you have them everywhere. Some of them are not having the opportunity to go to school. Some of them are just on the street. So one of the second phase of this project will be to have to have a strategy that will carry along all these youth that are also on the street. Will also carry along the parents to sensitize them, because we believe that there is a lot of work that should be done at the youth level so that they are the one who will in the future defend or promote democratic principles in Africa, rule of law and all that. So this is one of the concrete initiatives that we have in place at the African Union level, and we believe that it can also help. And last year I was in the US for a program, and I used the opportunity to discuss with some think tanks. So if we in this platform we have think tanks that are working in this area, it will be important to build some synergy to try to see how to support such kind of initiative, even if it is not only on the ACDEC, if we can have an instrument that we can use to sensitize the youth. Those who are at school, those who are outside the school context, it will be good, because you can't just we don't want to have those youth that you see on the street clapping for the military when they take over the power, because they don't really know what they are doing sometimes. They don't really know what they're doing. They are not educated. They are not sensitized to the democratic principle. They're just happy that they are seeing something is going on, like, but they don't really know the impact. And as we always say, those youth who were clapping in the street in Bamako or other countries, they are no longer clapping. They are no longer clapping because they have seen the reality. So we really need to do some work with the youth, and it is important to build synergy here.
A few comments, if I may, because I've devoted probably the last 20 years of my life or more to education. And as Nelson Mandela said, education is the greatest tool to change the world. It's the most powerful weapon to change the world. And I think that you are going to the very heart of what Ben Kiyoko said needs to happen in Africa, and that is building a culture of democracy. I worked for the UN, and my children went to the United Nations school. And I never would have thought, as an international lawyer, to teach the UN to preschoolers, kindergartners. From the very first year they start school, all the way until they graduate, they learn about the UN. First, it's about the rights of the child, the children. They see the UN flag. And so those kids from that school, they're probably among the few in the country who know about the UN. The other thing is that the challenge, I organized a seminar in Accra a few years ago for professors to ask them to teach international law and African Union law. I also attended a meeting of the deans of African law schools. And what they said was, we would be delighted, but we don't have teachers who are trained and we don't have any materials for the students. So I think you're really going to the heart of the matter. This is a comment that is certainly from the heart. One of the participants has said, Cameroon needs you now more than ever.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think yeah, it is sad when you see what is going on in some of the countries. And we used to say that in Central Africa you have a lot of issues, but it is not only Central Africa, it is not only Cameroon. You have, of course, long-lasting presidents in Central Africa, but what is going on or happening in other regions like West Africa is also sad. So yeah, we need to work together.
I guess I should return to the part two from the young person who was asking you this question. So let me not forget. Um, Question number two, as a law student, how can we create a strong link, connection, as well as integrity between law schools located in Africa in general, or at least the major districts of the continent, such as East Africa, for promoting the notion of democracy and good governance?
Yeah, I think this is also a question and an answer at the same time. There is definitely a need to build some synergy between those schools located as we say, overseas, and the contribution they can have to the peace, the democracy, and good governance in Africa. It might be a good idea to have a network of law schools, the same way we have in Africa, we have some it's not exactly law school, but we have what we call the Club de l'Union Africaine, Club of African Union, that are in Africa, in many countries. They are supposed to be a kind of network where you discuss issues related to democracy and try to see how to build synergy. So this can be it can be used as a model also for those schools to have a network, to have a synergy. And I'm happy to see this question coming in this seminar, because as I said in the beginning, this seminar is also going to contribute at our own level to the democratization process in Africa, to building the Africa young generation, to having the Africa we want or the Africa we need. So it is good that these kind of ideas are coming up, and I want to invite the organizers, Virginians and colleagues, to take note of that and see how we can have this kind of network in place.
Well, this is something that I've been working on since I retired from the UN in 2017. And I started with the African Law series. It's a collection of 7 volumes. It is the most comprehensive collection of OAU and AU documents. It's available free of charge. And that was to answer the first request of the teachers for study materials. The second thing we did was we started the African Law Schools Project, and we provided hard copies of this 7 volume set to law schools in 30 countries. But then I'm sure you will understand this. There was no funding. So the project ended, which made me very sad, because many of the deans of the law schools wrote to me. They were so appreciative, and they said, this is the only book we have on AU law in our library. And these projects were limited to law schools in LDCs. And sadly, Africa has more LDCs than any other region in the world. So there are places, for example, South Africa, they have many books, and there are also books on human rights. But this covered everything: transportation, democracy, good governance, absolutely everything. So that was the second thing, the African Law Schools Project. Maybe someday it will come back, you never know. And then the third thing was to have a seminar, a face-to-face seminar. There was no funding again. And so that is why I am not a technical person, but I decided to try the internet. And actually, it was my son who attended courses during COVID. He told me that I could do it. I told him no, and he said, yes, you can, because I will help you. And he actually started this whole thing with me, and neither one of us knew anything about it. We had over 2,000 people sign up for their very first seminar, and I think we have about 1,500 for this one. It's a bit difficult because we're running into the holidays, we're running into the exam period, but we have over 200 universities in all 55 AU member states except Sahrawi, and that is because I don't believe they yet have their own university. But we are creating a network, and there's another network that we are creating. As you know, the African Union adopted the new convention to end violence against women and girls. And after that powerful convention, participants wrote to me and said, I'm concerned about this in my country. What can I do? So again, with no funding, you know the challenge, we set up a coalition. And within 2 weeks, about 1,400 people signed up. And now I think we have probably 3,000 members in this coalition. And then the second question was, what could we do if our main resource is goodwill? So we set up a petition, which people can sign for free. And I think we have almost 4,000 signatures. So I hope that we are building a network. This was a pilot project that we started last February. I was not convinced that it would work, but it has worked. We're finishing, Candace and I, this is our fourth and last of the year. We have 4 planned for next year. And we are really trying to bring together the law schools, to bring together the government legal advisors, to bring together the community, the entire legal community, from first-year law students to, we have legal advisors, to presidents, prime ministers, members of parliament. So it's really a wonderful group. The only thing I regret is that we can't have more of a direct exchange of views. But we are committed to continuing this, and we always take on board the suggestions of the lecturers, of the participants, in terms of how can we best serve? And the thing that I always focus on is what is the greatest practical benefit that we can provide to as many people as possible. So to that participant, stay with us, keep signing up for the seminars. Let's see, we have a few more questions here. Well, I think you've touched on this, but since they're raising it, I will raise it as well. Why is the AU giving more concern during military takeover rather than the course that is the failed electoral process itself? I think you've addressed this. Is there anything you wish to add to that?
Yeah, that there is a gap at that level and we need to work on it. Yeah.
Okay, the next question. Does excluding the opposition from the electoral process confer legitimacy or even democratic values upon the election? What legal means or instruments exist to sanction cases of irregularities in the results reported by the stakeholders?
Good questions. A good question and very interesting. But yeah, we've seen, even for this year, for the past elections, some exclusion of opposition leaders, opposition parties to contest the elections. But at the same time, also, it is very difficult to appreciate that because at the AU level, of course, we promote inclusion. We always say that the election must be inclusive enough. But at the same time, when you look at the countries where you have the exclusion of the opposition leaders or parties, they always have a way to do that. They have a way to make it legally. They don't just say, okay, you are excluded. We don't like you, you are excluded. No, they will say, okay, you are excluded. Like in Cote d'Ivoire, I think one of the key leader was excluded because they say, okay, the constitution does not provide that you can be a dual citizen in Cote d'Ivoire. So I think he was having the French citizenship and also the Ivorian citizenship. But before the elections, I think something happened, and then he left. He was having only his French citizenship. But before the elections, he was supposed to use his Ivorian citizenship to contest the election. So in the dossier that he was putting together, he was supposed to have his Ivorian citizenship document, which he did not have. So that also create another whole of discussion because people were saying that the decision to exclude him from the electoral process is a political decision. But you also, when you listen to the arguments that are being put in place by the justice or by the constitutional court of the country, they will tell you for you to contest the election, you need to have the national citizenship. If you don't have it in the dossier, we cannot maintain. So there is always a way to do it. They don't just do it overnight. They do it legally. They try to use some legal norms or forms to do it. And it is a bit difficult to, address this issue. But the only thing that the organization would do is always make sure that in all the intervention or the discussion with the member state, they always promote the inclusion of all the stakeholders to the electoral process. The second phase of the question, what legal means or instrument exists to sanction case of irregularity in the result reported by stakeholders? The AU always deploy an observation mission. The AU deploy the observation mission, and the AU will prepare a report of the observation mission that will tell you exactly what they have observed on the ground, what they've seen, what are the irregularity, and that will be in the report. But the report will now come out after the results have been after the elections have taken place, and the AU has to present the report to the member state. I used to think that there is a gap between the time where the report is prepared and where the report is presented to the Peace and Security Council, because by the time the report is presented early, at least the Peace and Security Council will have enough time to, address some of the issues. But it always comes after, because they will do the observation, will do the report, and then the report will be submitted later on. So by the time we are able to address that gap, when the results or the report is presented on time, I'm sure the AU Peace and Security Council can address some of the issues that I've mentioned, because the truth of the matter is that some of these irregularity are being reported in this report. So it is important for it to be presented on time so that something could be done within the time frame. But if the elections are over, the results are there, and then the AU will now come after 2 months, 3 months and say, okay, there are some irregularity that were noticed in the electoral process. It might not be that easy. But what they normally do is that they organize a session with the Peace and Security Council, with the member states, that organize the election. They present the report and they provide some advices, some way forward for maybe the next elections that will take place if the legislatives are coming, so that the member state can try and correct it. But there is a gap in that presentation of the report that needs to be addressed.
So then you're eventually presented with a fait accompli and it's too late.
Yes.
But it is interesting that governments at least try to justify it. So they are recognizing at least that these things are governed by law. They're just not complying with the AU law. I never comment on things politically, but I worked with someone who served as a member of the International Law Commission. That was Maurice Kamto. I worked with him a very long time ago. And I just thought he was a wonderful person and a wonderful international lawyer. So I don't know what reasons the government had. I believe he was excluded from running, but based on my experience working with him with the International Law Commission, I thought he was a very special person. Let's see. Are the pitfalls of elections that are so frequently observed in Africa attributable to a crisis of democracy or the irresponsibility of the African political actors?
I did not get the question, sorry.
Okay. Are the pitfalls of elections attributable to a crisis of democracy or to the irresponsibility of political actors? I can tell you yesterday, Ben Kyoko said it's the leaders who stay on and refuse to leave. But this question is for you. Is it a crisis of democracy or is it the irresponsibility of the African political actors?
Come again with the first part of the question. I'm looking for the question. I can't find it.
Let's see. Yeah, it's kind of in the middle. It's a question. Let's see. Now I've lost it.
So does excluding the opposition from electoral process confer legitimacy?
No, it's not that one. There are now 32 questions, so I'm looking for it. Basically, the question is, I think the question is answering it itself. The elections that fail in Africa
Mhm.
are they the result of some failures of democracy in Africa, or are the political actors to be held responsible? Are they the ones who are the problem? Is it a lack of values of democracy, democratic elections in Africa, or is it the leaders, the political actors? Who
Yeah,
is the
yeah, I got the question. So I think it is, of course, it is a lack of will from the political leaders. They are the main actors here, but it is also having an impact on the democratic values that we're supposed to defend. So here, I think we can say that it is definitely the political leaders that are in fault.
Ben was talking about this and saying that when they refuse to step down or they find reasons to continue, that this is, in his view, a failure of leadership. This is one, two, three. This is the fourth question in the queue. What are the limits to the implementation of the principle of constitutional supremacy when the fundamental law itself is the result of a social or even political contract in the form of a peace agreement or ceasefire between political parties or the nation's driving forces?
So I'm trying to get the question written so that I make sure I read it
It's
also.
it's it's the fourth down from the top. One, two, three, four.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what are the limits to the implementation of the principle of constitutional supremacy when the fundamental law itself is a result of a social and even political contract in the form of a peace agreement or ceasefire between political parties or national driving forces? Yeah. This is a very, very interesting question. I think here that, yes, you have some constitution that have been developed, as part of a peace agreement, a peace ceasefire, and the most of the time you have this constitution that will be in place until you have a final constitution. You always have it in place so that you can organize the country, you can organize the power in the country. But after the crisis or the conflict, we always feel that there is a need to go towards a constitution that is being adopted after the peace process and the ceasefires. So there are some limits. There are some limits in the implementation of these constitutional documents when they are resulting from social or political contracts. And that is why you always have a constitution that will emerge after the crisis is over. Yeah.
Okay, the next question. Are electoral democracy and good governance? Oh, I think we've answered this one. Let's see.
Yeah.
I have to figure out.
I think there are some down. We did not address them. What do you think of organizations like ECOWAS in West Africa, which prefer to be neutral? Constitutional amendment require inclusivity process. Yeah, there are some questions.
That's a
Yeah.
good one. let's see, I don't, who asked this question? Oh, let's see, I'm trying to find it. Yes, okay, I'm with you. It's the most recent question. Yes. What do you think of organizations like ECOWAS in West Africa, which prefers to be neutral or to be accomplice when the people's choice is not respected, as in Guinea, where the electoral process was canceled due to a military coup orchestrated by the outgoing president himself, who then allowed his own man to uh, remain in power? Does it deal with the main ECOWAS goal? And perhaps what is the AU role in that regard?
Yeah, as we were speaking, I was trying to open the decision that came from the extraordinary session of the Mediation and Security Council at the level of head of state and government on the situation in the Republic of Guinea-Bissau that took place virtually on the 27th of November 2025, sorry. So I think ECOWAS is not that neutral because at least they were able, like just like the AU did, to suspend the country, and there are some measures that will be taken right after that suspension. And the same thing happened in other countries. So, and that is also why you have at ECOWAS level some of the countries that have left ECOWAS because they disagree with them for so many reasons. So ECOWAS, from my point of view, is not that neutral. They are trying to, address the situation. Maybe they are not doing rightly. Maybe they are not doing it rightly because what happened in Niger, as you all remember, ECOWAS was pushing for a military intervention when the coup d'etat took place. But when the coup d'etat is happening, ECOWAS is always trying to face the situation. They have some measure, they sanction the country, they suspend the country, and that is also the same thing that the AU is doing. So I don't share the view that ECOWAS is being neutral when it comes to unconstitutional change of government. And in the case of Guinea, something was done because, as I write, there is a decision that was taken, and the same thing also happened with the African Union Commission that took a decision to suspend the country. So we can always discuss about the role that ECOWAS is playing in West Africa, but I think ECOWAS also has instruments like the Protocol on Good Governance and Democracy that are giving them some guidance on how to address some of those issues. So yeah, they are trying to do a role, and AU is also, following the same step, using the instrument to sanction the countries when there is a coup d'etat. And in the case of Guinea, ECOWAS took a decision, and the AU also took a decision. There will be follow-up measure that will follow that. They will try to support the country, yeah. The second phase of the question, I think it is a comment because mainly they are saying that, okay, the coup d'etat that happened is not really a coup d'etat. That discussion is, all over the place. I don't think we can answer the question here, or if Virginia or Abibata can say, okay, clearly there was no coup d'etat. It was something that was plotted by the president because he was losing the elections. We can't confirm that. We can't confirm
Yes,
that. But the
yes.
only thing that the AU and the ECOWAS observe is that there is a military takeover of the power, and they have expressed some regrets for what happened, and they have taken some measure like sanctioning the countries. I think that is the most they can do at this level. Yeah.
Yes, I stay out of politics. I try to limit myself to international law questions. This is a recent question. It's the last one in the queue. The balance of democracy through constitutional supremacy and the rule of law, how can we achieve it? And also, how can we demilitarize the electoral systems in African countries?
Yeah, that is also very interesting, but it would have been good to have Tore Sibanda so that we could have the conversation because the electoral process for us to qualify them that they are militarized. I don't think it is in all countries or in all the electoral process. It's a general problem. I don't think it is a general problem. So in some countries, it might be the case, but not the case in others. So yeah, we need to make a distinction between this at this point. Um, I don't see I don't see the question again.
Oh, I think it may have dropped off. Let me see.
The balance of democracy through
Yeah,
constitutional supremacy and rule of law. Stop that here in my
yeah.
chat.
The question has dropped off.
Okay,
Um,
sorry.
yes, sorry about that. That may have been
Mhm.
maybe I misclicked. The basic question was demilitarization of the electoral process. I think that was the main thrust of the question.
Yeah.
Um, Again, they're referring to a specific situation in Chad, and I don't know that you can comment on that, but they're saying if we take a country like Chad, can we say the people have justice or government respects the Constitution? I don't know that you want to comment on country-specific questions. Do you want to comment on that, or should I keep going?
Let's keep going.
Okay. This one is in French. I'll do my best to give you a rough translation. What is the possibility of imposing sanctions for violations of democratic principles in Africa? And if so, what forms would these sanctions take? This question is from Bizez. She's second up from the bottom of the queue.
Yeah,
C'est bon, c'est
so
en français.
OK. So, je peux répondre en français pour dire que au niveau de la CADEC, quand on prend la charte africaine sur la démocratie, les élections et la gouvernance, vous avez l'article 23 qui définit les changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement. Et il y a 5 points à ce niveau. Et l'article 24 et l'article 25 qui parlent de la question des sanctions. Et je vais vous lire quelques points de l'article 25. Premièrement, on dit que si le Conseil de paix et de sécurité constate qu'il y a eu changement anticonstitutionnel de gouvernement dans un État partie et que les initiatives diplomatiques ont échoué, il prend la décision de suspendre les droits de participation de l'État partie concerné aux activités de l'Union en vertu des dispositions de l'article 30 du protocole. La suspension prend effet immédiatement. Cependant, l'État suspendu est tenu de continuer à honorer ses obligations vis-à-vis de l'Union, en particulier celles relatives au respect des droits de l'homme. Nonobstant la suspension de l'État concerné, l'Union maintient ses relations diplomatiques et prend toutes les initiatives afin de rétablir la démocratie dans le dit État partie. Les auteurs de changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement ne doivent ni participer aux élections organisées pour la restitution de l'ordre démocratique, ni occuper des postes de responsabilité dans les institutions politiques de leur État. Les auteurs de changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement peuvent être traduits devant la juridiction compétente de l'Union. La conférence impose des sanctions à l'encontre de tout État parti qui fomente ou soutient un changement anticonstitutionnel de gouvernement dans un autre État, et ce, en vertu des dispositions de l'article 23 de l'acte constitutif. Donc, c'est pour répondre à cette question, pour dire qu'il y a un certain nombre de choses qui sont prévues, un certain nombre de dispositions qui sont prévues au niveau du cadre normatif de l'Union africaine pour sanctionner. Mais comme on l'a dit tout au long de ce séminaire, il y a la nécessité de renforcer ces sanctions et d'appliquer ces sanctions de façon équitable, qu'on n'ait pas l'impression qu'on applique le principe de deux poids, deux mesures. Donc, certains pays sont sanctionnés de façon plus dure que d'autres. Donc, il faut vraiment que cette application se fasse de façon efficace, de façon équitable, et qu'on puisse, au besoin, renforcer ces mesures.
This question is one, two, three, four up from the bottom. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but it's Abdijalil. And he's asking about, he's saying that constitutional amendments require inclusive process from beginning to end and a vote for community representatives, depending on the country, the constitution, the guidelines. So most African courts obey current ruling parties. Is there any court within the African Union that can hear complaints?
Yes, so at the African Union level, you have the African Court on Human and People's Rights that is based in Arusha. But I must agree with you that the court has some limitations in, dealing with some of the issues. It is important to go back to the missions that were given to the court and try to see if they can address some specific questions when it comes to constitutional amendment, because as I said, it is quite difficult to address them because they have been done in a very soft way, in a very they try to make it legally, so it is sometimes difficult to address it, and I'm not quite sure the court in Arusha can have that competency at this moment. Yes, but yes, why not? Why don't we strengthen the court? Why don't we empower the court so that they can assist the AU in combating the unconstitutional change of government?
Ben addressed this question yesterday and he referred to a couple of cases, which I don't remember, but I think he said that it is possible. In fact, someone did bring a case about an election irregularity, and there have been certain decisions taken, though I don't remember them, about uh, the court being able to um, consider cases involving any human rights. So I think that this may be a new trend, and it could be a very positive one. Um, we are almost out of time, and when we finish with your lecture, I will answer a question from a participant from Sahrawi about the petition. But what is the good news? What is your hope for Africa?
So thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation that took place here today, and I think in Africa we can still have some hope because you have some initiatives that are being undertaken. I really put some hope in this project that we are currently having with the schools. And I also want to invite all the stakeholders to support that initiative and also support the initiative beyond the school level so that we can make sure we take along all the youth, because my hope is on the youth. I don't want to say that our generation and the one above is not doing the things always rightly, even if I said it. But the youth can really play a key role. They can support us in this process, but they need to be sensitized. Education is key here, and I think there is hope. There is hope, and I personally believe that at the African Union level, we will definitely have to change the way we do things, because if you are doing something and it is not giving you the positive result, then you have to question what you are doing or how you are doing it. And we will reach a level where we will have no choice than, doing the right thing. And the right thing to be done is first to make sure our instruments are comprehensive enough. If you take the ACDEC, we did not discuss the issue of popular uprising that is really creating an issue, but that is not being defined by the African Union instruments, because those things came after the adoption of the ACDEC and other instruments. So it is important to have comprehensive instrument and also to make sure that we have a sanction regime that is there, that is, that can stop people from violating the democratic principle. At the AU level, I know that there is a committee. There is a committee that is being put in place that is working on sanction. That committee need to be revived because they are there, but they are being created. But there is a need for them to really take over and make sure that if there is a sanction that is being taken against a country, they do the follow-up to make sure that the sanction are really being imposed or the member state is complying with what has been decided. So I believe that we will reach a point where we have no choice than changing the game. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that wonderful lecture, and I hope that you will join us again. As long as I have you here, if you were to come back and join us for another lecture, which I hope you will, what would be the most important topic?
I think we should discuss further this issue of constitutional amendment, because we have been discussing more about unconstitutional change of government being only due to the fact of military coup. But it is important to discuss particularly this constitutional amendment. What is the constitution? Because constitution now is being defined as something, an instrument that is under the hands of some military, some leaders, sorry, that are just trying to use it to remain in power forever. So we need to have this conversation taking place with all the youth. What is a constitution? The constitution is supposed to be there for the welfare of the citizen, not to extend the power of one individual or to strengthen his power. The constitution is supposed to have a good content that will address some of the issues like bad governance, like the lack of the bad way resources are being distributed in the country and all that. So it is important to have something particularly on constitution. What is a constitution? How should a constitution should be developed? What should be the content? How should it be amended? So that we make sure the constitution have some safeguard measure to fight this instability that is going on the continent. Because some we're having military coup, but at the same time we're having unconstitutional change of government taking place silently. Silently, when someone changed the constitution so that he doesn't have to contest the election anymore, he will not contest the elections anymore. He will only go and be voted at the National Assembly, where his party has like 60% of the majority there. So you believe that this person will make sure he stays in power forever. So these are little things that are there in place, but there is a possibility that in the future people will say, okay, why do you waste time or energy organizing a coup d'etat? Just do it the soft way so that you will not get issues with organization like AU or the rights. So we have to look into that. The constitutional manipulation, the constitutional amendment, what is a constitution? What is supposed to be the role of the constitution? This is something I believe important for the future.
And can you remind me, what was the subject of your paper that you wrote 8 years ago?
So the existing gaps in the AU normative framework on unconstitutional change of government. So that paper was able to come up with all the gaps that you have in the instrument and also to provide some recommendation on the way forward.
Judge Yusuf will be discussing that on Friday. Would it be useful to combine the topics of the Constitution with national election laws, or maybe those are two separate lectures?
I think it can be two separate lectures to give enough time, to give, visibility to each topic.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I learned so much. This is such an important topic. And as you can tell, I'm planning to contact you to ask you to please join us again.
Pleasure, with pleasure. Anytime, please.
Thank you so much.